Hi, we're going to actually work on something really cool that I found out. It'll touch on some of the topics I want to cover in another video with everything starting with Blender Paint, but, well, actually, everything is just Blender. I call it Blender Paint because you can paint and you can use everything else in Blender to add to that. And this is one of those situations where something comes up and I finally realize how to use it, and I feel kind of dumb for never having touched it before. I've got this called Paint. This is what I've got. I've got a node editor on my left, and I've got a UV image editor, which is 2D only, right here in the middle. And I've got a properties window for seeing the brush and brush mask settings. What we're going to do is start with a new image, and really, I'm going to keep it really simple. Just the default black 1024 by 1024. Hit OK. We're going to have to put this into paint mode, so we'll click view and change to paint, and our toolbar will come up for the paint, and you'll see that there's not much going on here right now, and this is where the magic is actually going to happen. We're going to decide to use this option, texture nodes, and we're going to choose brush, new, and then use nodes. That's a lot of steps, but it's necessary. Now, what I want you to see is your texture is automatically loaded here. Now, if you wanted to load it up as a mask, you could tap here and choose it, but we'll get to that later. We'll be showing you the difference between the two by using two different procedurals or steps. Now, the checker pattern, that's here under pattern. You can also apply a brick, but we'll just use the checker to show you how the brush works. I'm going to turn off the extra toolbar and end panel for right now, and we're going to give ourselves enough room to paint. I'm using a very cheap Wacom Intuos, low budget, and my brush, you can see it because it's white. If you are working with a different color, you can set it some other color to get it show up a little bit better. Press Alt-R to reset your image when you paint. Anyway, if you need to see the curve of the brush, you can see it like that, but unfortunately it doesn't give you an option to color the curve, so I don't normally use that. Okay, back to the tools. We're just dealing with a regular text draw brush. Just to cover a couple of basics, you have a few of these brushes here. The fill brush works just like it says. You can fill it tapping a couple times with the strength. You can fill it all the way, and then go back to a brush. Right now we're actually using the checker, so I want to show you how the brushes work just using this brush. Tiled is exactly like what it says, and it's tiled and it goes out connected. Only thing is I found is that sometimes with tiled you might accidentally nudge your brush and move your canvas, and it'll change the way it works. Okay, so Alt-R, I'm going to change to view plane, and this is where we'll actually be able to see how this works. As I come, let me turn off the pressure for the radius. I'll leave it constant radius. As I work, it's following, and it's basically staying in this square just like it sits, but it's following and putting another dab on top. That's because of the settings here. Spacing 10%, space. Okay, like if we were to use a drag dot, you would drag it around and then set it. Drag it around, set it. If you were to use the dots, you place the dot and it kind of just fills up to the full on the dot. If you were to use airbrush, it works kind of like an airbrush, just barely dropping out a little bit at a time. Anchored starts in from the center of the brush and you pull outward. line is pretty much the way it says. You tap, pull to the point where you want it to end at, and it goes out there. And curve, really fancy. Let me go ahead and select all that. Control click to put the first point, then click, and then you can pull to bring your Bezier curve out. Press enter and it'll stroke along the path. Okay. Now if we change the mapping for this brush here with this curve still there, Alt R to get rid of what we've painted. Let's change it to tiled and see what happens. And you'll see that it's now applying that tile across the image along that path. That's pretty important depending on what your outcome, your desired outcome is. Now that we've covered the different kinds of strokes, which also can be found by pressing the letter E, and you can change to the kind that you want. Alt R to get back to the black. Here we're going to change to 3D, and it has a initial 1-to-1 relationship to our image because of the 3D mapping, and this would work also for your 3D model. If you paint on a 3D model with a UV image and you set your brush to 3D, it will respect the size here. So what you'll want to do is, I keep a mouse, well, you'll click the first value and then drag downward to highlight all three, and you will actually increase the size to make it smaller. It's an opposite ratio. So going up to, say, 5, by holding control, I can control it to go to full numbers. Now if I pick up my pen again and I paint, then you can see that the value is definitely different. And this is also can be manipulated still with an offset. So let's go ahead and select them, offset a little bit, and you'll see that they are offset just a little bit. If we go something like that, actually let me just offset X a little bit. Doesn't seem to really be doing too much. I might be wrong about the use here on the 3D. It might be actually for offset for the view. I'm going to go back to ones. Now, one thing I'd like to show you on this is the controls. F will make your brush larger and smaller. And then Shift F will increase or decrease the value of the brush. And that's the strength here. You can turn off and on the pressure here for the radius and the strength. Another interesting thing is actually Control F rotates your texture. So you can actually see it in real time setting it. You can also use the control button to keep it at a very tight, or use the shift button in very small ratio changes. So very precise. Then you turn around and Control F. I guess with the 3D you're not able to change it. Let me change back to tiled and see if that works. Yep, we're able to change it with tiled and probably with view plane. Although with view plane it accumulates and it's like the small dabs. View plane works with using the rake and random controls, and what I like to do is bring this back to a 1 and show you about the directions. If I use it without rake and random, you'll see that it stays to the orientation of how we've set it. So this now is up and down only, follows. Now if I turn on rake, you'll notice that the pattern follows the curve of my stroke. To get a better curve that's not quite as blocky, we can come here to input samples and bring it up to say 4 and still not suffer too much of a lag on our brush, depending on how large of a image we're working with and how many pixels we're affecting with our brush. And we're just working with a checker. This is just so that we can see how it works with the paint tools. If we press rake and random, it'll follow, but then it'll spin. This is really good for setting up a brush that has a texture to it with alpha, so that we can get some interesting cracks and crevices and dirt, because the randomness keeps us from looking like we're painting it. So since we've got to that point, let's see what we can do here with the textures. Typically, if we turned off nodes, we would add a new brush and we'd tell it something like distorted noise, turn on a ramp, affect it that way. And this is what I'm talking about rake and random. Get interesting little stuff going on. Now, but this is mostly what I would use for detailing on top of something. But if I'm going to put the color down, it might be nice to try it with something that's a little bit more built. So that's why I would like to go ahead and set up a new one, use nodes, and let's see what we can build here. I'm going to disconnect that checker, Shift A. I'm going to add a texture of like clouds, and we can either put it here to the output, or we can actually add a viewer. And the viewer we can actually increase the size a little bit. And now some of the controls don't work exactly like the compositor, but this is pretty close to having a little mini brush compositor. I did not know how much you could actually do with this, so I've gotten to where I'm just digging around trying to find things now. Shift A, you can add another texture, so like a Voronoi. Let's go ahead and maybe plug this into the black and go to our viewer. It's a little bit different. Maybe try it into the white. Let's get Alt-R. I'm going to need to change back to tiled just to see how it works. Now this is with the full-on brush. We can turn on the ramp to actually turn it into something more like a mask, where we're only affecting certain parts of it. And if we do change back to view plane, rake and random, you can see about getting some very interesting effects. And this is two procedurals together. And you're probably wondering, why are you plugging them into each other? Well, we don't have to. We can actually use some other way of combining them. And that's the control swipe turns it into a knife, and you can cut the connections. Let's try a mix node, color mix node. We'll put one into each of these, and maybe we'll multiply them together. change some details. Like that. So we get a little bit of something like that, put it to the output, and here we're only getting the opposite. Let's flip the ramp here with this button so that we can, well, let's just turn the ramp off. I'm going to go with the tiled again so I can see what's going on. So we've got pretty interesting, but it's not, doesn't have a lot to go. If we turn the ramp on, we get a different, there we go. That's a little bit better. We turn on the, I turned on the gradient by accident, but it's an interesting idea. Alt R, turn that back off. Okay. Now, we haven't done anything with this yet to do any crazy stuff yet, but we could turn around and put another, like a pattern, like we were doing here. I'm going to go ahead and just change this to black, and maybe feed this into the factor of the mix, and then we start getting something like this, which is pretty crazy. So let me try something else. Let me try this one here, and let me put this as the factor. Doesn't really do much. I'm going to put a marble into the factor, and then you get something like this. If you turn on view plane and rake, you might get an interesting effect. Let's flipping the curve here. Turn off the ramp to find out what we get without it. Alt R. I'm just going to tap in and see what kind of effect we get. Just tapping a little bit. Okay, this is interesting, but there's all kinds of things we could do if we were designing this, I guess. Let's go to Voronoi pattern, or a saw. Like I said, it can slow down a little bit if you've got samples up and you're using a large brush. We're actually using a very large brush here at 136. So if I come down a little bit, see a little bit better of a response. That's very interesting as far as information there. And we might be able to use something like this. Go and clear the field. We might use this for maybe some sort of metal, like galvanized or something. Just very lightly bringing it in. I go ahead and press 1 on the number pad to, well, let me just come in. It's pretty crazy. What surprises me is that this is a very complex setup for a couple of procedurals manipulating each other. Alt-R. It's almost like torn paper now. If we were to say go 3D, and that's pretty interesting. Now the pattern itself is just this checker pattern. I think possibly we might be able to use something else. So let's add an image, open something from maybe my desktop. I'm going to set up this image and run that to there. And it looks like it's, not sure. Yeah, it's using it, but it's looks like it's repeating it. So here, since we're in 3D, take it up a little bit. Alt-R, Shift-F, bring it up. Turn, make sure pressure's turned off. And we've got a repeating pattern on top of a repeating pattern. It's pretty crazy. Now, here's the thing. This was doing pretty well with the 3D. And this is pretty crazy now. You can get all kinds of stuff with it. Let me see if I can do something with this. I'd like to go ahead and save this as a test. And then I'm going to make a new one. Use nodes. And here I'm going to just use the checker as an input for two images. So I'm going to grab an image from desktop, say something like that, and another image, and they're not really like, I just want to see what happens with two images, and we're going to set it up as 3D so we can get this to match up. And I'm going to bring that back to 1. Very weird. So the checker acts as like a stencil between the two images. There, of course, it would be better if they were actually the same size image, but they're not. This is just a test. But the whole point is it became a brush, the two images together. So maybe we could use another image as, as a color mix as a stencil with using another texture. Let's try something else. Let's make a color mix node as the join for it. Put it together. And it's probably going to just show the one, but what we'll do is add maybe blend texture. Linear will be fine, I guess. And we'll use the colors for the blend there. So Alt R. And there you go. It's blended here to here, and it's showing it there that it's actually mixing the green to the one side and the other one to the right side where this goes. So it'd be interesting. Let me see if we've got a color ramp. I wonder if we could change the output. So yeah. So constant. Okay, so that means that there's this line right here. It's exactly where the color band is. Moving it this way maybe should bring it over here or not. Flipping it. And that puts that over there. Well, that's a lot for that, but you kind of get the idea. You've got this ability to save this. You can actually then turn around and maybe animate one of these with the timeline by putting it keyframes. I'll do that in another one. But the idea is here you've already got this texture is available, and you can even go to texture mask and bring up one of the other ones so that it actually masks it with the black and white values of that one. Unfortunately, I've got it on rake, so it's actually taken a while to process. There's a lot of pixels in just one stroke there. But you can kind of see what's going on there. You get some pretty interesting effect. So you can combine images, you can combine multiple procedurals, and come up with texture effects that are way more complicated. I would say that these examples are not indicative of what you can do. They're actually just showing you how it works. And what you can do is set up like particular images like metals, woods, rust, and then multiple procedurals together to come up with interesting organic patterns as masks and ways to relief or even use as like a layer mask between two images or such. And this is only dealing with a single image in the Paint editor, you know, the 2D editor. Imagine what you can do with layers of images combined in either Blender Render, GLSL, or even with cycles. All right, I guess that's about it. This is going to be a live video, so the audio is going to have a lot of ums, uhs, and ums. and hopefully you guys get something out of it. Alright? Thanks a lot. Talk to you guys later. Bye.